Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. Today's flight is piloted by Randy Wright, who is joined by his first officer Jeremy Grapinton. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly with the Wright Flyer. Ground traffic control has moved us to the departure lane, so please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, and ensure that all tray tables are stowed in the upright and locked position. We will be taking off shortly, and once again, we'd like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show as we soar above the friendly airwaves in comfort and style.
Indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, quite like we can here at the Wright Flyer. Now that you're aboard, please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've taxied to the departure lane and are awaiting takeoff clearance from air traffic control. While they go through that mindless, bureaucratic red tape and regimentation, my first officer, Jeremy Grapinton, and I, along with our first air marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, shall delve into the pre-flight checklist because there is a lot of news and information to get to before we may indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, I know it may seem like we spend an inordinate amount of airtime here on the Wright Flyer with regard to the Second Amendment. However, there is a very legitimate reason for that. It is because if you look at the Second Amendment, that is your greatest protection for proactively maintaining and safeguarding each and every one of your other fundamental and unalienable rights. But of course, we are facing a dangerous world today with terrorists running amok in Europe, and yet I have a feeling that if they had something like our Second Amendment, the death toll would have been much less. And I'm actually going to pass it on now to our first air marshal to see what he thinks. Nelson, welcome aboard. It is quite the privilege and honor to have you aboard the second time.
We're glad to be here, Randy. Thank you for inviting me again. I just have one thing to say to the anti-gun terrorists in this country, and if you give me a second, I'll say it precisely.
Go ahead.
That's what I got to say to them. That's the only thing that should be said to them.
You know what it reminds me of, Nelson? It reminds me of that time that Bernie Sanders was up there saying, well, you know, I support the Second Amendment, but we just need to get rid of all semi-automatic firearms, and I'm going to go drink until my liver, scars over even more because I am obviously a moron.
That's pretty good. Well, I tell you, everybody can do Bernie Sanders because all you have to do is scoop out half of your brain. And you look at Bernie Sanders, voting record, it's actually to the right of John McCain.
Now that's a scary fact.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that it's to the right of, as a senator, to the right of John McCain. But when he's running for president in the Democratic Party, he seems to be from Vermont, because Vermont was the original Constitution carry state.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Bernie Sanders running in Vermont as a senator, and he's pro-gun. But the minute he starts running in Vermont and runs nationally, he's as far left as you can get. He's so far left, he falls off the planet. Now, the point I like to make is that anyone who is anti-gun is actually a terrorist. And they use terrorist tactics to attack our rights. That's what terrorism is.
Mm-hmm. And they also use fear tactics, because if you think about it, what they're trying to do is ramp up fear and, take off of the emotional tragedies that occur with the shootings, say like at Umpqua Community College or at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. And that's the thing with these radical extremist left-wingers. They always go off of raw emotionalism because they think that will allow them to better manipulate the people, to strip them of their fundamental and unalienable rights. And what they don't understand is that our Constitution, being based off of natural law principles, is actually timeless. And therefore, you can't just strip that away because it was endowed to you by your creator. The only way that you lose your rights is after being adjudicated beyond a reasonable doubt for encroaching upon the rights of somebody else. And this just doesn't seem to penetrate their skulls.
Well, go ahead, Jeremy.
Part of the problem is that these hoplophobes think that they are endowed with being able to replace our creator. They want to be our creator. They
Well,
want it. They want to institute things where they make people believe that they give us our rights. That our rights are not endowed to us by God Almighty, but from the government themselves. This is all part of their socialistic propaganda crap.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's because they bow at the altar of statism, the religion of the state. That is what Bernie Sanders believes in, that and wild turkey, or whatever his drink of preference is, because I am convinced he is pickled half the time. You'd have to be pickled to sit there and think that banning semi-automatic weapons would somehow, not weapons, but semi-automatic guns. I'm not even going to play into their semantics here, but to ban a tool, a working tool, because you think that would somehow solve all the violence in America. I'm pretty sure that Nelson's guns, just like my guns, just like your guns, Jeremy, haven't one day decided to wake up, run down the street, and shoot little crack whore Sally. I just don't think that's how it happens. But that's how they make it.
Yeah, mine have snickered at me a couple of times, but that's about it.
Well, mine are usually with me, at least one of them, all the time. And I defy gun-free zones because for the fact that they violate my constitutional rights and abridge the Privileges and Immunities Clause. Again, of course, we've talked about that in length before, but when you get to the succinct fact that the federal government has no authority to regulate arms, the states are completely prohibited. I don't care what they have to say, and when they start infringing on your rights, they become targets, just like the Muslims become targets, because they're no better.
Yeah. I mean, when they encroach upon our fundamental and unalienable rights, it reminds me of a quote that comes from Niccolo Machiavelli, author of The Prince. He wrote back during the Renaissance that if a leader of a nation disarms his people, he dishonors them. Now, that's something important to take from there, because what it is saying is if you deny the people the ability to defend themselves from any and every threat that faces them, you are actually dishonoring them because you're stripping them of a fundamental right. And that was the beautiful thing that our founding fathers understood. And, we are so fortunate that George Mason went out and required that the Bill of Rights be included within the federal Constitution. Because could you imagine what a twisted mind like Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or any of the utopian socialist communists on the left could conjure up if we didn't have the express statements of our fundamental and unalienable rights within the four corners of the Constitution? It would be frightening to think of what they could dream up.
Well,
go ahead,
I'll take some, Jeremy. We got a couple quotes that I can give you. Sinclair Lewis. When fascism comes to America, it will cloak itself behind children. The other one, that was directly taken from a quote from Adolf Hitler. And I quote, "The state must declare the child to be the most precious treasure of the people. As long as the government is perceived as working for the benefit of the children, the people will happily endure most any curtailment of liberty and almost any deprivation." And that's what the left-wing anti-gun terrorists have used since 1934.
Well, Nelson, I'd say it even goes back further than that, because that was one of the arguments that they used to push the 18th Amendment for prohibition. Think of the children. So it's been around with us for a long time with that Volstead Act.
Sure. Hey, with Machiavelli, when he was talking about dishonoring the people, when you take away the sole means of a person being able to defend
Oh, Jeremy, you dropped off there a little bit with your
Priority of their
lag. Try it again.
with Machiavelli talking about dishonoring the people, taking away their ability to protect their sole primary right, that of life, because without life you have nothing else. That is why it's listed as life, liberty, and property within the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, specifically in that order. The Second Amendment is the safeguard to that. If you take that away from them, you are dishonoring them by basically saying that their life isn't worth anything.
Randy, let me ask you a question. You being an attorney, and I'm, basically a layman. What do you think what is your opinion on business owners being able to ban people when they open up a business to the ingress of people willingly to come onto their property? They must abide by their constitutional rights, don't they? Because putting a sign on your door saying no guns is the same as putting no coloreds or no Jews. So they are just in much infringement on your constitutional rights as racism.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. And the thing is that it's as we've always said, that your rights end where somebody else's begin. So how is it that a private business owner can go out there and say that I'm going to create this dangerous zone and send up this red flag to any type of potential, thug or terrorist to say, it's free reign on the people here? And it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a huge fight going on in the state of Texas right now with Whataburger, which is one of those burger restaurant chains that actually is headquartered here in Texas. They are in staunch opposition to the recently passed open carry law, which there's still a lot of problems with that, saying that you have to have a carry conceal license before you can open carry. We ought to go to Constitution carry. But this idea that you can sit there and encroach upon somebody's rights, well, here's the thing I would do, because I know they're going to sit there and say, because of the way that the Supreme Court has tried to limit it to say that the Constitution doesn't apply to private citizens. Well, actually, it ought to, and it should. And if you actually read the preamble to the Bill of Rights, you would see that it does apply. Hell, if you just read the preamble of the Constitution itself, you'd see that it applies to the private citizens. The 10th Amendment certainly specifies that. But what you should be able to do is, if you get hurt or if anyone is put at risk because of that, and there's some incident that happens, then there ought to be a wrongful death claim brought against them, because they are completely liable for creating a dangerous zone. The same thing should happen with Umpqua Community College, that went out onto that website of theirs and bragged about being a gun-free zone. Any gun-free zone, there ought to be a class action lawsuit against each and every one of these institutions for making life be at risk, because you are basically just telegraphing out to the world that you support these terrorists, and that you open your doors to these terrorists to prey upon the people, because most of the quote unquote shooters that have done these things, whether it's at Umpqua Community College, whether it was the black gay man Vester Flanagan shooting those former colleagues on public television or on a live broadcast, or whether it be that moron Dylan Storm Roof at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston back in June, they are cowards. They are cowards that are abusing their Second Amendment right, and therefore, when they encroach upon other people's rights, the rights end for them, but not for the rest of the law-abiding citizens. And again, our founding fathers understood that we had to take this so seriously that they required it be a presumption of innocence until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But the way that these anti-gunners go about it, there's this law here now where if you are even suspected of domestic violence or abuse, and even before there's a tribunal during a divorce case, they will take your guns away. That is totally unconstitutional. Absolutely unconstitutional.
Well, Randy, after having taught the Constitution for over 20 years, and I've read probably the Constitution as much as anybody breathing, I can find places in the Constitution that even mention business, and nowhere in the Constitution does it mention anyone having a right to have a business. It just says right to have property. Once you open that, you willingly open your doors to the public. So that ingress is saying that you will abide by the law, you will abide by the Constitution, and under 241, 242, 18 USC, 1983, you can have your pantsuit off. You should be able to have your pantsuit off for violating your civil rights. Just as if you were a black person, or if you were a Jew, or if you were a Catholic, or a Bokononist, or a Samsonite who worships luggage and long hair. It's the same thing. And what I try to get people to understand is you can't violate someone. Like you said, your constitutional rights stop with somebody else's starts. But your right to business does not override someone else's right to life. And that's what the whole founding of the Second Amendment is on. Your right to life. You have the right to defend yourself from someone taking your life, whether they're a terrorist, a criminal, or anyone else. And that person that owns that business or owns the property that business is on, if it's rental property, has no right to stop you. So personally, I don't abide by gun-free zones, and I hope to hell somebody tries to do something. Any police officer, I live in California, I carried concealed the entire time. I dared a police officer to try to arrest me because I will own them. And you two know my record in court, in federal court. I am 1-0, and I beat the IRS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, there is, I believe it's under Title 15, the findings of Congress specifically dealing with the Second Amendment. They pretty much reiterated exactly what the Second Amendment is, and they hold that to be explicitly that and nothing else. And Nelson, you know what I'm speaking of.
That would be the protection of firearms. Yeah, that's 15 USC section. What would that be under? 105?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the protection of firearms, protection in firearms and legal commerce act. I think that's what it's called, from 2005, which state that, yeah, Congress, and you can't separate that from the rest of the act. Or actually, yeah, you can't separate from the rest of the act. The point is that Congress has recognized a right to keep and bear arms, which is inclusionary to the Constitution. Congress has said, looky here, we have the Second Amendment. Your right to keep and bear arms cannot be infringed by anyone, because you cannot be sued if you produce firearms or you sell firearms if somebody takes that illegally and harms someone. You can't be sued. You cannot be sued, period. They cannot even bring that to court. Of course, we've seen time and time again that the left-wingers try to do that, but it's always thrown out. There's never been actually a case that's been heard by a court because it's illegal to even hear it. So anyone, including the federal government, that would try to prosecute you, because let's say again, you are immune to prosecution. You are immune to arrest. And somebody tried to say, well, they can arrest you for anything. They can illegally arrest you for anything. It doesn't mean that arrest is a legal arrest. So that would actually be felony. That would be a felony by a police officer for illegally detaining you. And what gets me is why no one has sued under 1983 under Title 42 in any of the shootings. they should sue the pants off of those business owners for violating their civil rights. Those people that have died, their family members should have been jumping up and down. And as for, let me mention the ridiculous Texas concealed open carry law. How many people have any idea the NRA fought that? They fought on the side of not having constitutional carry.
Yeah, I knew that. And, it comes to a head with that case with the Army officer down there in Belton. His case against the state for violating his rights was thrown out by the Circuit Court of Appeals. And so he tried to get that to go up to the Supreme Court, and that was just shot down at the beginning of this month. And this happened as of last month. And there's another development here in Texas. There is now the mainstream media is labeling them as an anti-Islamic group in liberal Dallas. I hate to use that term, liberal. In utopian socialist-leaning Dallas, there was a quote-unquote anti-Islamic group, and the camera for the media even focused on one of the ball caps being one with a Southern Cross battle flag on it. They were out there with their AR-15s to protect the citizens after there were these Syrian refugees found at the Laredo border, and they were saying that we're here to protect the citizens. Well, the Democrat mayor of Dallas had SWAT teams called up and on the ready to pounce upon, you've guessed it, those American citizens exercising their Second Amendment rights, not advocating violence, but actually advocating protecting its citizens. And if that is not a proof positive that those political actors in positions of power are diametrically opposed to the will of the people and the safety of the people, then I don't know what is an example of that.
Well, what's the Second Amendment there for? It's there to protect your private, your life, but it's there also to protect your rights. The Supreme Court has ruled several times that you have the right to even defend your life against a law enforcement officer if they even think that you're a criminal and try to harm you. Supreme Court ruled that you have the right to self-defense, and you don't have to flee from anyone. You can stand your ground against anyone on this planet. You have the right to carry a rifle. You have the right to be armed. You have the right to even confront your wife's paramour if you think she's sleeping around with you on you. That's amazing that they even said, the Supreme Court said that you have the right to confront with a firearm your wife's paramour. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it just goes to show, when you look back at the opening salvos of the American War of Independence, what were the British regulars coming for? They were coming for their guns. When you look at the opening salvos of the Texas War of Independence in 1835, what were the Mexican dragoons coming for? They were coming for their firearms. This is a pattern. If you want to be an independently minded individual who knows their self-value, who has an understanding of what their rights and also their duties that are coupled with those rights are, you have to be able to use whatever force is necessary to defend and safeguard those rights. And that was what our founding fathers understood, and that is primarily why they included the Second Amendment within the Bill of Rights. It was because they understood that the nature of government is always to go down the route of tyranny and oppression, to strip the people of their fundamental and unalienable rights. But when you think about it, who are the true sovereigns in this country? And that is truly the revolutionary aspect of our country and what our founding fathers had as a vision. It is we, the people, that are the true sovereigns in this country. But you wouldn't know it looking at the way government is, situated today.
Well, look at the fact that The Supreme Court has ruled that a police officer, the federal government, and for that instance, does not have to defend you, does not have to protect you, which is actually kind of true. The federal government is there to protect itself. That's why the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, it says pretty precisely that it's there to protect the government. It's not there to protect you. Your job is to protect yourself. That's the reason the Second Amendment's there. That's the reason the Supreme Court ruled on V. Star v. U.S. that even criminals may use deadly force in resisting attacks by law enforcement officers. That's why on C. Thompson v. U.S., there's nothing wrong with carrying a rifle for protection. There they violated in Texas their right to carry a rifle, because I'm sure if they were just carrying pistols, they wouldn't be somewhat up in arms. D. Beard v. U.S., there's no duty to retreat before using deadly force anywhere. E. Allison v. U.S., self-defense is for juries to evaluate, not for judges to exclude. So they cannot, a judge cannot exclude your right to self-defense. Threats, F. Wallace v. U.S., prior threats by an attacker are relevant to defendant's use of deadly force. So if anybody threatens you and comes back, you have the right to shoot them. That's what they ruled in this. There's the retreat from confronting a spouse's paramour. There's no duty to retreat there on G. Alberti versus U.S. We have I. Allen v. U.S. Self-defense decisions can be made in a hurry. There's no duty to retreat on public property. Let's see. The last one's J. Rowe. Withdrawal from the fight revives the right to self-defense. You have that right to self-defense. Period. That's irrefutable. You also have the right to self-defense against your own government. Because the fact is that they're trying to take your rights away. It's the same as trying to take your life away.
Now, going with the government, people, like you said, are under this auspice or this utopian unicorn bareback riding pipe dream that the government is there to protect them. The government's job, specifically stated in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, is to protect the states from invasion and domestic violence. The states, not the people of the states, not the sovereign citizens, the states, because the duty, like Randy said, falls specifically with the people first and foremost. Okay? Now, when you mentioned, I believe it was I. Allen v. U.S., no duty to retreat in public places. That right there is specifically geared towards a person being able to have the ability to defend themselves in public, meaning that if these businesses, these gun-free zones, violate that, they're actually violating that Supreme Court ruling, because they are abridging that ability of that individual to be able to stand their ground there should something happen. So they're removing that completely away from the individual. Now the individual has no choice if they're there and they're not armed, which I don't understand why somebody would not be armed, but there are individuals that don't carry all the time. What chance do they have? What choice do they have? They have to flee, or they may die instead of standing their ground, which they may die anyways. But at least they'll take the bastards with them.
Well, I just, even on this, how many times do we hear all this falderall about this and that? We hear now from the left wing that governors don't have the authority to stop the so-called the Syrian refugees. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's right
Absolutely,
there in federal law. And 8 USC 1522 says that it's up to the states to allow those refugees into the states. It's also Article 4, Section 4. That's an invasion. What I don't understand is why Governor Ducey here in Arizona has not enacted the Arizona State Guard. People need to understand that the National Guard is a federalized reserve unit. It is not a state's militia. The State Guard is your state militia. It's the Militia Act has reauthorized They tried to take it away under Teddy Roosevelt. Of course, we know he was a progressive windbag. And then it was reenacted. So the states have the authority, and then Texas has a state guard. In fact, Texas State Guard is 3 times larger than any other state's guard. I don't know if you're really familiar with that. I'm pretty sure you are, Randy. Arizona has a state guard. Actually, Governor Brewer actually signed the law back into being that Arizona has a state guard. They've done nothing with it, though. They sent me an application to train their special operations, and I've heard nothing more from them. Even when I try to contact them, the phone number's been turned off. So Governor Ducey needs to get off his hind end and enact the state guard, because they have the authority to go to the border and stop this. Because you guys remember, we found all kinds of evidence that those people have been here for years. ISIS has been here for years. And we have plenty of evidence they were going through Texas, going across the border there by El Paso and into Mexico. They had a plot to actually kill Oprah Winfrey. Now, you would think Obama would get off his butt and protect his old little buddy Oprah Winfrey from being blown up.
I think Sasquatch hates her, though.
Yeah, probably does. The Squatch, she hates just about everybody. Bobo had that pretty much figured out, on finding Bigfoot.
Yeah. But you mentioned the state guard. They've actually activated the state guard here in Texas. They've been down on the border, ever since, what was it? Towards the end of last year or summer of last year and the beginning of this year, when we had the waves of all of those supposed unaccompanied minors. But just today, in Nuevo Laredo, we now have supposed Syrian refugees crossing over from Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, into Laredo to then turn themselves in to our Border Patrol agents and then proclaim that they are, seeking asylum here in the United States, thereby ensuring that they stay here at minimum 3 years to go through the backlogged, quote unquote, immigration courts. And that seems to be by design. Somebody instructed them how to do this. And it was interesting because my father was watching the news with me today at lunch, and he said that just smacks of being organized by the Mexican consulate, because they've done stuff like that in the past. But you know who really empowers it? A federal government that does not actually go out and act upon one of the few powers that is expressly enumerated to them, which is protecting the borders of this country. They just outright refuse to do it.
Well, we have a federal government that is more interested in brokering arms to Mexican cartel members. What gets me is the state of Arizona does not protect its integrity, does not protect the citizens of Arizona under Arizona revised statutes. There's plenty of leeway there to arrest and prosecute everyone that was involved in Operation Fast and Furious. And then we hear the hypocrisy of Joe Arpaio claiming this and claiming that, but he could have marched his little old ass down to the federal building 3 blocks away there in Phoenix and started arresting people. But they won't prosecute them because, it's prosecutorial discretion. And under Arizona law, they don't have a misprision law, which they will when I'm done with them because I'm up their butts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this selective enforcement that's going to kill us. And I know that Jeremy and I have talked about this before. If you stop and think about it, the reason that they want to throw the gates open to all of these illegal aliens and all of these refugees, remember back in 2008, and I know that I mention this almost every program, but I think it's because it's of such importance that it bears repeating so that people understand what's going on. When Barack Hussein Obama stood before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media in the 2008 campaign and said that he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States of America, what he was speaking to was replacing we, the people who have an understanding of our fundamental and unalienable rights, which are contained within the 4 corners of our shared Constitution, with those people who are unfamiliar with it, thereby making it easier and more malleable to try and go in and reshape what this country is. And you see it with the indoctrination in the universities throughout the country with all of this whining crap about white privilege. Folks, white privilege cannot exist. No type of privilege can exist because there is equal protection under the law. Therefore, there is no such thing as white privilege. There's no such thing as black privilege. There's no such thing as flying purple people eater privilege. There is only we, the people of the United States, endowed with fundamental and unalienable rights from our creators. But you see this divide and conquer tactic used by the radical extreme left, because what they're trying to do is to strip us of the Constitution and replace it with some Marxist doctrine, which is just proven to be a failure everywhere that it's been tried.
Well, even on that, Randy, we do have kind of some privilege. It's the ruling class privilege. I mean, we've gotten that we have a ruling class now. You can't run for office unless you're a millionaire. We see that with Donald Trump. He's in first place right now. We see that the Donald Trump keeps talking well about the Second Amendment, but less than a year ago, and he was saying that he supported a total ban on what he called assault weapons. And let me inform people, there was an assault weapon once. It was created by the Germans. It's an STG-44 called the Sturmgewehr. That means assault rifle, assault weapon in German. That's the only one that ever existed. It even bears the name. So Trump, he supported a assault gun ban, and he supported a national registration for all firearms. Less than a year later, he's completely turned what he says around to support constitutional carry, support this, support that. And you get to the fact that a year ago, how does somebody change his complete being around in a year? He wasn't struck by lightning, and God did not jump up his pants.
Maybe his hairpiece changed its mind. That's the only thing I can think of.
Herpes? Well, he's got it. Herpes. It's a canarial disease. It's untweetable. What gets me? I mean, I was with a Tea Party before anyone that I know was. We were having heads on a stick in California over a year before anybody had ever heard of a Tea Party. We were going after Arnold Schwarzenegger, whose dad was a freaking brown shirt, before anybody had ever heard of a Tea Party. We organized, we rallied. It didn't do us any good because, California is left-wing hell and, so forth and so on. But we have what I don't get is, and just based on the Second Amendment, Crumpet is so full of dog manure that it's leaking from his ears, because I've never seen anybody change their whole basis of belief system in less than a year. And what he's saying on the Second Amendment, throw everything else what he said out the window. And in the Second Amendment, I don't see how any Tea Party member who Trump is the very face of what the Tea Party opposed since it was enacted in 2009. How they can support him at all? And he goes against their very claim. So either one, they're liars and they never supported this, or second, they have no idea because people are stupid and they'll believe a lie because they want it to be true or they're afraid it's true. Or three, it's a combination of being stupid and, Trump wants to call everybody else stupid. Well, the fact is that his supporters are about the most idiotic people I've ever encountered with. They reek of Obama supporters in 2008. I have never seen this kind of act since Obama in 2008.
Well, Nelson, it's probably a combination of Ron Paul supporters and Obama supporters. That's kind of the way I look at it. It's as if they're the love child of Obama supporters and Ron Paul supporters. So they're Fruit Loops nuts, and they're stick their head in the sand kind of challenged. But with Trump, the whole thing is he's trying to ride a messianic type wave. And we've seen that with Hitler. We've seen that with a lot of your dictatorial type. Even Obama tried to ride a messianic wave. And what it kind of boils down to is that people are so sick and tired of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. The gutless opposition party has caved at every avenue. So people are so desperate, they're going to turn to Trump or his hairpiece and see that as a guiding light out. Because, I mean, certainly it wouldn't be Governor Krispy Kreme. He's not going to inspire anybody to do anything. But who it really ought to be is one who stood up for the Constitution ever since he's gone in and has actually admitted where he's been wrong, when he's been wrong. I'm speaking to the TPP and all of those supposed free trade agreements. And that is the Texas Senator Ted Cruz. I have been nothing but impressed with his stances thus far in the race. I think that he is committed to the United States Constitution, and I think that you'll agree with both Jeremy and I here, Nelson, when we say that the only litmus test that matters when determining whether somebody is, qualified to hold the office of President of the United States is to see whether they strictly adhere to the Constitution.
Well, we saw in the, of course, you all know that Dianne Feinstein had her office call me and give my family a direct threat when I opposed her with a legal letter of cease and desist on her unconstitutional gun bans. But it was Ted Cruz that sat across the table and destroyed her on the Second Amendment. To his credit, and I hate saying this, but truth is the truth, Lindsey Graham, of all people, was one of them that stood at the forefront of protecting the Second Amendment against these, and fought his old buddy John McCain at doing it, fought for the Second Amendment. But you didn't see anything from Ron Paul Ahmadinejad, and his son ran the ophthalmologist, Ahmadinejad. It sounds like a wrestler's name now, doesn't it? The ophthalmologist in this corner.
A midget dinner jacket.
Oh gosh. But guys, in the Senate, you saw very few fight it. You saw that McCain got up, his Weasley behind, get up there and whined like the little whiny bitch that he is. And on the Senate floor, why can't we have a vote on this? Because it's illegal to have a vote, you old swine. So sit down and put a cork in it before I turn you upside down and fill you full of concrete.
But I'm a maverick. I'm a maverick. Vote for me.
Yeah, maverick. Yeah, Mavericks are freaking branded. And then they're no longer Mavericks. I mean, we're in a fight here of our lives to get McShane out of office, and Sarah Palin has to walk into Arizona again and side with him. I mean, she's made herself about as irrelevant as you can make yourself. Some of the people that said that she was basically riding the wave to cash a paycheck, I got to say that's pretty much right.
Now, Jeremy, you had mentioned in the wake of the Umpqua Community College shooting that there was a push to change campus carry there in Michigan to where it would only be concealed only. I think that bears a bit of repeating here because, when you actually look at the clear and concise language of the Second Amendment, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, does that make any mention of mental illness? Does that make any mention of whether you pick dandelions in the middle of a crosswalk at rush hour? I don't think it makes any distinction. I think it just says shall not infringe.
Well, the thing with what's going on here in Michigan, I haven't heard any updates on it, but I'm still in the process of trying to formulate a letter. It's going to be a uniform letter that I'm going to send to the whole entire state legislature and the governor and anybody who would be a prospective candidate for future elections. I'll have it readily available for them should they pop out of the woodwork. I'm going to push for Constitution carry here in the state of Michigan for the simple fact that it's the only way that anybody should be able to, you know, carry their firearms. Uh, Not mentioning mental illness or any kind of deranged state that a person may or may not be in. People don't understand that the only way that two ways an individual is prohibited from exercising the Second Amendment, and Nelson touched on it earlier, as well as you did, Randy. Uh, when a person exercises their rights, and during the exercising of their rights in the commission of it, they're violating the rights of another person. They're no longer exercising their rights, they're committing a crime. And they have to be adjudicated as such. The only other way an individual would not be able to carry their firearms is if they're adjudicated in a court of law as being mentally incompetent. Now, if people are taking medications for certain illnesses, medical conditions, whatever the case is, even mental issues, just because they're taking medications or they may be seeing a psychiatrist due to some traumatic event where they need some kind of verbal couch time therapy. I don't know if it's because maybe they played Super Mario Brothers too many times and became warped. It's an inside joke. But the fact of the matter is, if they have not been adjudicated in a court of law, then they too still have the right to exercise their Second Amendment rights. They have that authority. Anybody that says otherwise, well, they're wrong. But people want to latch on to that, and they want to utilize it again for pushing an agenda that these hoplophobes love so much. And we have to remember one of the first things that Hitler did when he became Chancellor of Germany was to eliminate the firearms of the people. Why? It goes back to The Prince by Machiavelli. You take away the people's ability to defend themselves, you dishonor the people, but you're also making it to where they become your subjects. They will bend at your whim. They will do what you tell them to do. And that's the problem with these gun-free zones, all this anti-Second Amendment rhetoric that's being put out there. And people are gobbling it up because, as Nelson mentioned, well, think of the kids. Look at with Michael Brown and Ferguson. What was the whole story behind that? What was their whole basis of an argument? He was a gentle giant. He was just a kid. He didn't deserve this. They want to push all of that crap off. No, he was a criminal. He was a thug. He was a little potentate wannabe who didn't know how to wear his pants and wore shirts to cover his sagging pants, made him look like he was wearing some kind of a muumuu. It doesn't matter. People need to look at the facts of the situation. Stop buying into this crap of, oh, well, it's for the kids. You know what? If these kids, even at 12 and 13 years old, they know the difference from right and wrong. They know if they put their hand on a hot stove, they're going to get burned. If they continue to do it, I say let them get burned. That's their problem. At that point, they make the choice. They need to suffer the consequences.
You know what I'd like to see is how they try and weasel out of this case that's in New Orleans right now, where that thug just shot that fourth-year med student, and you see the gun jam, and you see him try and clear it, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah, let me guess. That guy is just a gentle giant, too. He's just misunderstood, and maybe global flattening caused that, just like it caused the Syrian refugee crisis, as
Senator Bernie Sanders says, I define democratic socialism off of this whole notion of what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said back in the 30s, and I don't quite remember because I'm a little bit pickled.
Well, here you get to the point. No law can be made to violate your right to carry a gun. Supreme Court ruled Gorko v. U.S. Carrying a gun is an innocent act. You can't be arrested anywhere for carrying a gun. It's an innocent act. It's not probable cause anywhere in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
These anti-gun state laws are all unconstitutional. The Firearms Act, the National Firearms Act, the NFA, which banned or somewhat banned fully automatic weapons. You can own one, but you have to pay. You have to go through another background check, and that's another one I don't get. I went through a background check every time I buy a firearm. Why? I've been through one.
Yeah.
A police officer, I had to go through a background check to that. Work in a convenience store, I had to go through a background check that's equal to a police officer. How is it they want you to go through further background checks when the fact is what they want to say, if they actually said what was on their mind is, and they want to find some reason to prohibit you. And on the mental illness aspect of it, yeah, you have about 10 to 15% of the population walk out there that are stone cold crazy. And work in a convenience store for a week, and you will notice that about 10 to 15% of the population is so inept in their mental abilities they can barely find their shoes. So and you have Bernie Sanders and his Vermont pickledness. You get Hildebeest Clinton, who has never found a law she didn't want to break. And what gets me, Ronald Reagan. People need to get off their knees and quit praying at the feet of Reagan. In his second term, he was not a friend of the Second Amendment. He was not a friend to the Constitution in his second term. And if I hear Reagan's voice, Reagan's freaking name one more time in these stupid debates, I want to reach to the television. I don't care if it's even Ted Cruz and choke them, because I'm tired of hearing Reagan. Reagan's been dead for 10 years. Give it up. If you want a real president to laud, want to start lauding Coolidge. Start lauding a Democrat, which is Cleveland.
Oh, I'll take you even further back. James K. Polk.
K. Polk.
Yeah, right. You run for one term. You say you're only going to be in the one term, and then when you're done with it, you have the good nature to go out and die. I consider that damn good.
Yeah. You hear Adolf Obama up there. The Second Amendment is there for a reason. Nobody ever uses it for the reason it's there for. So what good is the Second Amendment when it comes down to it? We have an illegitimate government. Our founding fathers, I'm not advocating war against this government, but our founding fathers would have already been at war with this government. In fact, I think they would have probably been at the war with this government starting with the Wilson administration, the FDR administration, the Truman administration, the Johnson administration, the Nixon administration, so on.
Let's go back to Lincoln. Go back to Lincoln.
Yeah, just what they did with Lincoln. If I see one more post on Facebook, Obama's the worst president in the history of the United States. You idiots don't know anything about the history of the United States. Okay, so stop it. Stop claiming you do. Because if you knew what Lincoln did to the state of Missouri, you would shut up.
Well, it's like I said when Obama was first elected. I said I predict bad things for the nation because when was the last time that a left-wing senator claiming to be from the state of Illinois, who was not actually born there, was elected president?
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. A tall, skinny one that was maybe a homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez, because we also have writings from Abraham Lincoln where we're sleeping with men. Mm-hmm. How many people are aware of that?
Yeah. Funny how history repeats itself when we fail to learn the lessons from it. And, it's interesting to look at the electoral map. The way that it is now, it looks exactly as it did in 1860 and 1861. It is just frightening. Absolutely frightening.
History is a boomerang. You throw it up in the air, you better pay attention to it, or it's going to come back and smack you in the back of the head every single time. And then what's you going to do? Blame it on the boomerang? And that's the problem. You have too many irresponsible people out there that have the right to vote, and then their vote doesn't go the way they want to, and then blame it on everybody else. And I'm pointing the finger right at the Republican Party. How many times we see that their little boy that they shove down everybody else's throat doesn't win because you have a large number of voters who said, I've had enough of you shoving an idiot down my throat, I'm done. Or they go vote for third party and find somebody that actually, whether they think they're throwing their vote away or not, they're actually voting for the person who most closely represents them. That's supposed to be what voting is all about, not voting. I had a guy come into the store once and said, well, I voted for the winner. I said, well, did you want him to win? Nope, but I always vote for the winner. I'm going, dude, this isn't freaking betting on who's going to win. This is voting for who you want to win. He goes, now I always win. That's how I vote. I'm going, man, that is the crux of stupidity, and the crux of why this country is in the garbage pile that it is now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, speaking of the Civil War stuff, going back to that group that the Dallas mayor ordered the police to have the SWAT team out for him, I noticed that the media focused on the guy that had the Southern Cross battle flag on his hat. It's a little bit like the one that you have, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And they were pointing that out as if to somehow vilify him. After all of this crap that we have seen with respect to the flag, what is it with these left-wing people and then the gutless opposition party and Nikki Haley? Nikki Haley ought to be ashamed of herself the way she acted this summer. But to come out and blame a piece of cloth for the insane machinations of a twisted individual, it's just maddening because it makes no sense. I've never seen a flag run up down the street and shoot somebody, just like I've never seen my guns get up on their own, run down the street and shoot somebody. No, they never go to the real problem, which is the left-wing indoctrination that we've got in our schools, the left-wing indoctrination that we've got in the media. Let's take it a step further. That Vester Flanagan fellow who ran out and shot those people on live television that were his former colleagues, he was an angry black man who was gay, and they found the rainbow flag in his apartment. Why didn't they run out and say we need to ban all rainbow flags? Why didn't they do that?
It wouldn't be tolerant on their part to do that. And tolerance, all this tolerance crap. The only tolerance I care about is the proper measurements I have when doing my reloads or my hand loads for my firearms. That's the only tolerance I care about. Period. I'm tired of this political correctness crap. It's strangling literally the genitals off of this country. Our country has become feckless and neutered. It's sickening.
We get to the Democrat Party. Let's look at the history, the actual history of the Democrat Party. And they say, you get the left-wingers saying, well, we were the conservatives at the time. They were the conservatives at the time. And the GOP, they were the ones that were liberal. That's not how it actually works. And you people know nothing about freaking how politics works. So shut up and suck a banana. You get to the point that the Democrats created the KKK, who were anti-gun. The Ku Klux Klan wanted complete ban of all firearms for people of color. You get to the point that get into the Wilson administration, who was the first one who wanted to ban guns, and he was also about as racist as you can get. I mean, you don't sit there and view Birth of a Nation over and over and over again and applaud it. If you're not an absolute racist. And you
history and flashes of lightning.
Yeah, I mean, here you go. the FDR administration. How many people are aware that not only did the FDR administration throw Germans, Italians, Poles, French, and Japanese
Japanese.
into the internment camp, the Nazis in 1944 and early 45 offered over 1 million Jews in concentration camps and heading to concentration camps. They offered them to the British government to take them off their hands for the price of the trucks. I've never seen a truck kill anyone in battle unless you ran over somebody, and that's not pretty likely to happen if you're armed with a rifle. So the FDR administration didn't want anything to do with taking 1 million Jews and saving 1 million Jews from the Nazis. In fact, the Democrat Party denied that the Holocaust was even happening. And you get them still denying that the Nazis banned guns. That's so ludicrous as to be insane. Anyone who says the Nazis did not ban guns, they didn't ban guns to other Nazis. You could only own a firearm if you're a member of the Nazi Party. Everybody else was banned. And Jews couldn't even own knives. They couldn't own sharp sticks, axes, or anything else. That was an immediate death sentence. They would take them out in the street and shoot them in the back of the head.
Well, you know, Nelson, it kind of goes to this whole thing about FDR not standing up for them. Well, FDR didn't stand up for any principles. I guess it's because he just couldn't stand, period. But the truth is that what FDR was doing actually coincided with what the Nazis did. Few people know that Hitler actually wrote, before World War II started, actually wrote FDR a letter of congratulations for his New Deal program. And Bernie Sanders had given this speech, and this is what my solo flight was about the other night, where he was laughing at those conservative elements of the country back during the 1930s who stood up to Roosevelt and said, what you're doing is socialism. And Bernie Sanders was sitting there saying, they said it was socialism back then, but Roosevelt knew what was best, and what we need in America now is a New Deal. That's the thing with socialist policies. It's never enough. You give them an inch, they want more, they want more, they want more, and then they'll sit there and cry that they haven't even gotten more than what they asked for. And the reason they do that is it is a feckless, failed policy. It is destructive in every form, facet, and fashion. And that's why somebody like Bernie Sanders ought to be just chased down to the prisons, because if you stop and think about it, Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution says the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Socialism, wherever it's tries to tear down the system that was there before it, because that's the only way it can exist. And it's really contrary to the supreme law of the land here, just as Sharia law is. And therefore, anyone who is advocating socialism is advocating war against the United States, destruction of the United States and our fundamental and unalienable rights.
Well, Jeremy and I talked about that very same thing today, didn't we, Jeremy?
Yes, sir, we did. And the thing is, it could actually be viewed in some cases as sedition.
Oh, yeah.
Supporting socialism, communism, Sharia law. The thing is, under the Supremacy Clause, anything contrary to the Constitution is not what, and they want to push it off Sharia law as, well, it's our religious right. Wrong. Again, you cannot exercise your constitutional rights to infringe upon the rights of other individuals, or you cannot exercise your constitutional rights to violate or break any law. Supporting Sharia law is in fact sedition. It truly is. Now, where's James or John Adams when we need him with the Alien Sedition Acts? this would actually be a perfect case for that, and it would actually be very astute.
Get to the Ninth Amendment. I mean,
Yep.
it's simple. The enumerations in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. No court can
Absolutely.
rule. No court can have the opinion of that. They cannot interpret, construe, to deny or disparage, which is attack others that are retained by the people. And you get the idiots that says, well, how about the unenumerated rights? They don't exist. All rights are enumerated within the Constitution. That is why you have an amendment process. So you have the idiots in there that are trying to defy the Constitution. You have them that the courts that want to through the Constitution in the enumerations within disparage the others, which are the other enumerations. It can't be read in any way else. You can't inject another topic within the same sentence. You can't inject another principle, another subject into the same sentence. That's how English is written. That's how it's understood. And they want to inject a completely different subject into the sentence. We're saying others. Others what? Unenumerated? This says nothing about unenumerated rights. It says the enumeration in the Constitution. Those are the only rights you have. And you have the libtardarians, the Conan, the libertarians out there who want to say, well, whatever I think I want to have a right is a right. Well, that doesn't work that way, because you can claim that you can be a cow or monkeys can fly out your butt, and that's not a right.
And speaking to the way they misconstrue laws, going back to the Second Amendment, the way that they try and say, well, that speaks only to militias, as if the right to keep and bear arms only belongs to the militia. But if you actually read the sentence, it doesn't say that. And just using common sense, can militias have rights? No. Can militiamen as individuals, as citizens, have rights? Only the citizens have rights. And that's the other thing with this 14th Amendment thing, the whole anchor baby issue. That doesn't need to go to court. The amendment does not need to be rewritten. It says that it applies to citizens. Citizens, not illegal aliens, not criminal aliens, not space aliens. It doesn't apply to any aliens. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Well, that's the problem. It's simple.
Yeah.
Well, we can go back again to 15 U.S. Code Section 7901 of the Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. And it specifically states, under the purposes, Section B, or I'm sorry, under Section A, findings. Point number 2, the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution protects the rights of individuals, including those who are not members of a militia or engaged in military service or training, to keep and bear arms.
Mm-hmm.
End of discussion on that. It's really that simple. This is what our own Congress has found. This is what they've determined. That's what they've decided, and it is perfectly in coincidence of the Second Amendment. And anybody that says otherwise, they need to stop riding these unicorns bareback. I'm serial on that.
That's what people can't read and understand English.
Yeah.
The people bear arms is the subject. The people are the subject. The right belongs to the people, so it can't be the subject. That's how English is written and read. Anything that is owned and possessed cannot be the subject of a sentence. The owner, the possessor, is the subject. So what is the subject of the Second Amendment? The people. And what is the people? That's every citizen of the United States. Remember, only citizens have rights. There are certain rights that are granted in their privileges and immunities to people that are in residence or have come to the United States and broken the law. They have due process. Other than that, they don't have much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
But to the point, how do you read English? Well, apparently they can't even read English. The subject, of the Second Amendment is the people. That's who owns the rights. Who owns the militia? The people. They own that militia. It doesn't belong to the state. It belongs to the people of the state. And the people of the state have the authority to do anything they want to do, as long as it doesn't violate the Constitution.
Right. And it's because the people are the sovereigns. You know, that was the major shifting point with respect to what our founding fathers developed. Before, what did you call the king of a country? You called him the sovereign. Our founding fathers said, no, 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 it can't be concentrated in one singular individual or entity. The sovereign is we the people. When you look at any of the foundational documents, they always start with we the people. It goes, and that speaks directly to what our founding fathers believed. And it is that timeless truth, and it's proof that it's natural law. And that's something that people like Bernie Sanders, Aunt Hildebeest, and the Hiawatha hussy Lizzie Borden Warren don't get.
Pocahontas.
Yeah, Pocahontas, but she's also Lizzie Borden, the ex-murderess, because what they don't understand is that these are timeless. That's why they try and come up with this malarkey that the Constitution is a living document. It's so that they can then go out and kill it.
Well, I mean, you have the Wikipedia. I'm on the Wikipedia page on my computer right now on the Ninth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Here's the joke that it starts out with. The Ninth Amendment, Amendment 9, to the United States Constitution addresses rights retained by the people that are not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. It is part of the Bill of Rights. That is so wrong that how do you comment on how stupid that is? That's not how you read English. And then it states the Ninth Amendment. Further down, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. What is the subject of this sentence? Well, it would be the rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, no, it wouldn't be the rights because it would be the people, because the rights are owned by the people.
Right.
That would be actually the subject. The people are the subject of that. What do the people own? They own the rights. And what are the rights? The enumeration in the Constitution. People are not taught how to conjugate a sentence anymore. That's one of the first things I learned about second grade, how to properly conjugate a sentence.
Right. They don't know how to diagram sentences anymore. I don't even think they teach that anymore, Nelson.
No, they don't. And shall not be construed to deny or disparage others. Others what? Well, it makes no mention of the unenumerated rights. The others has to be the enumerations. Any other enumeration. It cannot be unenumerated rights. That's not how you read English. So there's so much that backs the Second Amendment. Almost every other amendment in the Constitution backs the Second Amendment, and the Second Amendment protects every other amendment and every other article within the Constitution. It forces the government. Without that, that is the most important amendment or help me out, guys.
Protection or guarantee.
It's the most important part of the Constitution there is, because without those arms, the government can do whatever it wants to.
Right.
It can take any right it wants to.
Yeah, it's the spine of the Constitution. It is what allows the Constitution to stay together. If you say that our society is a fabric, then it is the thread that runs through it all. It is what forms the seams and keeps the entire system from unraveling.
Right. Sorry, Jeremy. You hear the saying that these so-called economists talk about economy, talking about the how much the British had hurt the commerce of the colonies. That's not the reason they revolted. They had won that battle already. Every time they had fought against the and done it legally in court or just by pressure, they had backed off the British government. It's when they took up arms and they stabled arms and organized arms against the British government is that's when they came for us. They didn't come for us because we threw tea in the Boston Harbor. They didn't come for us because we protested against tax stamps. They came for us because we dared to have arms and we could kick them out. And when they were in fear of being kicked out, that's when they sent the military. And that's when they got their butts handed to them. That's exactly what would happen to this government. We have idiots out there saying, "Oh, you can't beat the people. You can't beat the government." They have an army. They have a little over 1 million people in the military, the entire military. That makes it about 112,000 combat troops. I would never want to fight my brothers in arms because I was one. But I'm here to tell you, you have 26 million American veterans. That would mean 2.6 million combat veterans. That's the largest standing army in the world, in the history of the world. There is no beating this, even with nuclear arms, because anybody that would try to use nuclear arms on our own territory would be signing their own death sentence, because even the left-wingers would pick up arms on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, going back to that Wikipedia site you were looking at, Nelson, I'm just wondering, how hard would it be for us to get the hacker group Anonymous to shut down Wikipedia for their, shenanigans and their stupidity? I mean, it should be done. I mean, if these individuals known as Anonymous actually want to do something that's valid, I'm not saying what they do with the Twitter accounts for these jihads, but you got to give credit where credit's due. But let them keep doing good things, shutting down sites like that Wikipedia. Better yet, let's have them unveil Hillary's servers. Hillary, the leader of the world. So
yeah,
it's just
not for that kind of stuff. I mean, you want to put propaganda up on the internet, as long as it's not breaking my leg or picking my pocket, go ahead. Wikipedia, you put what you want to up there. I've been on Wikipedia. I posted on the National Socialist Party. And of course, within 24 hours, it was changed back to the left-wing crap. They're not gonna allow anybody to put anything that's the truth on there. So it's propaganda. Yeah, well, so what? I don't use Wikipedia for anything other than pretty much to laugh about, because they're so wrong. Wikipedia is not allowed, thank God, so far, not allowed as to be used for any kind of resource for college papers. Probably soon it will be, since they're they get away with anything else.
Well, my whole thing is if the propaganda is out there and it's not combated and it's allowed to fester and thrive and stew about, it's going to be detrimental to everybody else. Because let's face it, political correctness, indoctrination of the kids, revisionist history, all that's coming together to perpetuate all this propaganda. So to me, yeah, let Wikipedia put the stuff out there, but we have to be vigilant about it. We have to look at it, and we have to be proactive in educating people about what the truth really is. And that's why we're doing this show. That's why we have you here. And it's just the whole point of our country has lost itself because the truth has just been swept aside. And it's like you've told me before, Nelson, the truth does not have an agenda. It just is. It's there. It's the alpha and the omega. It will always be, and nobody can ever change it. No matter how much it hurts them, they want to get rid of it. Well, too bad. Suck it up, Buttercup, because guess what? It's here and it's going to stay, and we're just going to advance it at every opportunity and chance we get.
Well, you have I just went to the Second Amendment on Wikipedia. States quote the Second Amendment. Amendment 2 to the United States Constitution protects the right of the people to keep and bear arms, and was adopted on December 15th, 1791, as part of the first 10 amendments contained in the Bill of Rights. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that the rights belong to the individuals, while also ruling that the right is not unlimited and does not prohibit all regulation of either firearms or similar devices. State and local governments are limited to the same extent as the federal government from infringing this right per the incorporation of the Bill of Rights. Well, here you have the problem, and I've heard Randy ran on this too, of incorporation doctrine instead of using the privileges and immunities clauses proper, because it can be incorporated into anything, can be disincorporated.
Sure.
It's that damn game of semantics that the left always plays, and that's something that we've harped about here on the Wright Flyer, going back to our first episode on September 11th of this year. It's when you play these games, like how Obama can't come out and name our real enemy as being the Islamo-fascists that want to kill us. It's that same thing of George W. Bush running out right after 9/11 and saying that Islam was a religion of peace. Well, how could a religion that adheres to the message of the prophet of the sword be a religion of the peace? That just makes no sense to me. It's contradictory, but that's the thing. They play these semantic games so that then they can whittle away at our fundamental and unalienable rights. And they have this plan that's a centuries-long plan, whereas we tend to get trapped into this idea of if we just live and let live, they'll leave us alone. No, these guys are radical. They are out to destroy us. And I'm speaking of the extreme left-wing zealots like Bernie Sanders, the Hildebeest, and yes, I'll even throw El Jefe Jebe Bush in there too. These are the guys that would strip us of all of our rights to leave us as weak and feckless to the rest of the world, to fundamentally transform us. And this is the other thing that gets me mad. Whenever you hear all of these people come out and say that we need, like Rubio, we need to repeal and replace Obamacare. No, you don't. You just need to accept the fact that Obamacare is not law because it's violative of the United States Constitution, and you don't need to replace it with anything because healthcare is a commodity to be bought and sold.
You need to replace it with the recognition by the courts of privileges and immunities, and the replacement by the courts of the Commerce Clause, which you can go anywhere you want to, no matter what state you live in, and buy anything that's legal. Same thing should hold true with firearms. They can't tell me that I can't go to Georgia or Texas and buy a firearm and bring them back to my house. They can't say that. It's illegal. Guys, I just got a warning on my phone that I am done for the night.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you here, Nelson. Thank you for being aboard.
One more quick thing. If El Jefe was to come out and say that, well, we just have to say no on Obamacare because it's violative of the Constitution. He may be treading waters into getting slapped with someone accusing him of plagiarism.
Oh, I have one thing to say in El Jefe, and that's in his new native tongue is "Bese me culo cordeza en el hoyo." Thanks for having me on, guys. You take care of yourself and keep supporting the Constitution because we need you.
Absolutely.
God bless you, Nelson.
Take care, Nelson. And with that said, folks, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your Captain, Randy Wright, and as always, my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, joins us. And as we've stated from the beginning, we were also joined by our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. We invite you to leave comments on our Facebook page, our Google Plus page, or our YouTube page, and we'll get to them. With that said, good night, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you next time.